This is the I Heart My Life show. Welcome to the I Heart My Life show. I have the incredible Emma Tessler here with us today, and she is an expert in all things marketing. And so I'm so excited to dive into specifically social media marketing and what's actually working in the online space right now. Because I know for me, there's always a lot of questions. There's so many different strategies, so many different things that we could implement. So I'm excited to hear from you directly, Emma. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your journey, because I know you started your business at a really young age. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about how all of that transpired and unfolded.
Yeah, I was not meant to be in marketing. That was definitely not the path that I saw myself going down. In fact, the world of social media marketing didn't even exist when I was, in high school and you're trying to figure out what to do with your life. I actually went to college for interior design and I thought, that is the path. I loved it. I'm a very creative person. And then I was in college and I was actually interning for a designer in 2015 when she came to me and she said, I'm looking to expand into coaching and consulting outside of the design world. And I've heard people are using Instagram to get coaching clients. Can you look into that for me? And so she handed me her phone and I started just digging into Instagram in a way that I never had looked at it before. I was 19. I was using Instagram to post like tie-dye I was doing in the sunset, like many people were at that time. But as I began to dig in, I realized there's a massive opportunity here. And I started to think, why are more brands not seeing this? This is obviously the future. This is clearly where consumers are living right now and where brands should be capitalizing on. And I really didn't know what that meant at the time because I knew nothing about brand marketing, but it just seemed like the future and that really intrigued me. So I began to continue working with her on her social media, taking on a few clients here and there. But I moved into working in design as I thought that was really the path I was supposed to be on. And I had this trajectory in my mind of what I was supposed to be doing. But then the pandemic hit and that changed everything. And so the interior design world was hit quite hard in 2020. And at the exact same time, the world of social media was changing insanely fast. So 95 Media is the brand I started in 2015. And in 2020, we just grew like crazy because finally brands were realizing, oh shoot, I don't have another option. Social media is the only way that I can actually bring in new business right now. And that was the first year that I felt like I was being taken seriously as well, because up until that point, and truly still that year, I would be laughed at when I would tell people I did social media. I would quote people a few $100s and they would look at me like I had 10 heads. And it really was just a very different world. But in 2020, as things started changing, I ended up leaving my job in design because I knew if I didn't take that leap at that point in my life, which I was 25 years old, which is insane, I just knew I was going to look back and wonder what if, and I didn't want to have that wonder. So as I went into building 95 Media full-time in 2020, we just absolutely exploded. Up until that point, I had been working nights and weekends and like 100-hour weeks to get this off the ground. And so when I finally was in it full time, I was like, oh my gosh, I have all this time. Like, wow, we can do so much. And it's just been a really incredible journey since then. We've been able to impact several hundred brands. And ultimately, what our work does is help other businesses scale and reach more of their target audience. So it's been incredibly rewarding to just watch all of these small businesses that we support with social media management services really grow and help the founders grow, help their teams grow, and of course, help the clients that they serve too.
So amazing. Thank you for breaking that down for us and sharing more. So I think it's so intriguing when people leave something that is, quote, safe, right? And move full-time into their business. And so can you talk to us a little bit about any mindset shifts that you had to make or anything you had to transform in terms of your thinking in order to make that leap? Or did it feel really natural for you and really easy?
Oh my gosh, I wish it felt natural. No, it's so funny because at that time, I And for like several years after, I said that was the hardest thing I ever did. That was the scariest thing I ever did, was putting in my notice for a job that truly was my dream job in college. Like, this was a company that I looked up to, I was so impressed by, and I was offered that job before I even graduated college. And so it really was like this big check mark for me in terms of like my career goals to work there. And so when I knew what I had to do, I ultimately began prepping like 3 to 4 months out, because I knew that I also needed to start paying myself because until then, I really was not paying myself from the business. I was fully reinvesting every penny that we made back into hiring a team and resources to create content and all of that. So the biggest shift on my end really was planning out our financials. And so figuring out, what do I need to literally just live on, like break even, pay rent, buy groceries, and can I afford to do that while also maintaining the team and being profitable? That was really like the only goal I had going into it. And so I just set this goal for myself. If I hit a certain revenue number for 3 months going into that time I was going to put in my notice, then I was good, because I knew I could pay myself and still have money left over. And so I was able to do that randomly because it was the most money we'd ever made. So it was kind of an unrealistic goal, but I set that goal. We hit it for 3 months. I put in my notice and I was like, we're going to hope for the best here. But it was a massive mindset shift, because it truly, as you said, it was leaving something very safe, of like a safe paycheck. You know, it's going to come in every 2 weeks, to a huge uncertainty. When you work for yourself, you don't have a guaranteed paycheck. And of all paychecks, yours is going to be the first to go if things happen. So it was a massive shift, and it was really scary, but a lot of scarier things have happened since then. So looking back, it's so fun to be able to see that was such a massive jump and leap, but also has resulted in such a rewarding, following future.
Totally. Yeah. And of course, I know the exact feeling that you're describing, and so many of our listeners do as well. And I think one of the things that has to happen is that your desire has to be greater than your fear as well. And you could see, like, this is really expansive for me. I can see that there's so much potential here. You loved doing it, and that desire to build that business and serve those clients. It sounds like that was greater for you than that fear of the uncertainty.
Totally. And it was also greater than the fear of staying in one place forever. I think that every entrepreneur kind of relates to this feeling of like, you're always looking for the next mountain to climb. And so for me, being in a job and where there really wasn't much room for growth, there wasn't much room for like, okay, what's the next step here? I didn't have the same rewarding feeling from my work there as I did just working until midnight on this, brand that I was building at the time. So it definitely was just kind of like, I have to do this thing. I know I have to do it, and things will be sacrificed in order to bring 95 Media to life.
For sure. Yeah. So there was that pool for you. And I think, there are people listening who have been in the same place and then they made that leap. And then there's others where there is still a lot of fear there and they haven't yet taken that next step. And I think that's important to acknowledge, because it's not easy and it can be really scary. And we've all been conditioned to play it safe and to go with the sure thing. And so breaking through that is not actually the norm. And I always say to people, so much of success and you going to the next level and ultimately getting the life you want is you giving yourself permission to do things differently and to follow your heart, follow that pool, even when it's not easy. And when you're doing something big, it's not going to be easy. And yet so many people allow that to hold them back. Yeah. So I'm curious to know, what are some of the positives? I know we'll get to some of the challenges, but what are some of the positives that have come because of you making this decision and following your heart?
Oh my gosh, like so much. We really wouldn't be here if I hadn't done that. We just wouldn't have been able to grow at the rate that we have and have the incredible team that we have to be able to support the clients that we do. But there have been a lot of really full circle moments for me since then. For example, as an interior designer, I was a member of this organization called ASID. And it's an organization where, you're just around other designers, you learn and get resources. And when I was a member as a designer, all I wanted to do was like be on the board, and it's a volunteer board. It's not anything crazy, but like be on the board and be an active member of the organization and kind of be respected in that manner of what I was doing. And again, I mean, I was 24 when I had these thoughts, which is kind of crazy. But then what's funny is right after I left design, I was actually offered a board position, and I was like, it's not a good fit anymore. Like, that's so disappointing.
Wow.
But since then, I've been able to speak at maybe 10 of their events as a speaker, as someone who's like been able to pour back into the community just in a very different way than I thought I would be able to back when I was a designer. So it's kind of moments like that where I'm able to take a step back and be like, wow, like this is really just the path that I didn't know I wanted to be on, but ultimately achieved the goals that I had in the back of my mind.
That's so cool. I love that, because so many people think like, oh, I've sunk so much time and energy and money and resources into going down one path, and now I realize it's not the right thing. But yours it just went in a different direction. But a lot of what you actually desired came true just through, a different path or different choices.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I'm a
good.
big believer in like setting the goal and then just kind of like letting it happen. Like
Yeah.
have this vision and know where you want to go, but also like let the world happen and let other things occur, because you never know the path that's going to get you there. And it very well could look very different than you think it should.
Totally. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about social media itself. If we can, break it down a little bit more. What is actually working in the online space, specifically with Instagram? And I know, well, correct me if I'm wrong, you work with a lot of service-based business owners. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't niche down, but I would say a good chunk of our clients is in service. Yes.
So what would you say is working in Instagram right now?
Instagram is, well, it's really the core platform for almost all of our brands, and probably everyone listening as well, where, whether you are on TikTok or you're on LinkedIn, you almost definitely have an Instagram account as well. So that's sort of your foundation and where you may be creating and then dispersing content from. When it comes to Instagram, what we've been observing for the past few years is just the absolute rise of importance within your community. So a few years ago, I would say like pre-pandemic, because the pandemic truly changed everything on social, but pre-pandemic, you were able to create content and the content did all of the heavy lifting for you. So if you were consistent with content, you posted something a little bit different than everybody else, you were, actively online, your content was the thing that brought people to you, and it was enough to sustain your growth. But as consumer behavior has changed over the past few years, being a part of something bigger than themselves or bigger than yourself has become more and more important for people online. And so you may have experienced that as a consumer yourself, where you're like, okay, I want to be a part of this community. And when people have names for their community, sometimes it feels like this little club that you're in. But when we look at content now, it is one of two really big growth factors. So yes, you need to post content. Yes, it needs to be consistent. Yes, it needs to be strategic. However, you also need to have a really intentional focus with your community. So as an example, with our social media management services, we handle all things content for our clients, but the other half of our work is community management. So in that way, we are not only nurturing the people who already know about you through comments, DMs on your content, but actually going out and finding new people to bring into the fold as well. So being able to identify who your target audience is, engage with their content, and allow them to build that brand awareness for themselves is an essential part to growth these days that I think a lot of brands are really missing the mark on.
And so you're not necessarily saying like everyone needs to have a membership or like a tangible community that meets in person or online. You're saying you're going out and finding other people who might be interested in the brand, bringing them in, nurturing them, developing the relationship. And then essentially the goal is obviously to turn them into buyers or people who are going to tell others about the brand. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And I mean, there's so many ways to do it. One example that I love that works really well is there's this idea of like a welcome message that can sound really cheesy, right? So what a welcome message is if someone follows you, you send them a message in the DMs. I personally hate like an automated welcome message. I think like we can all spot an automated message a mile away and it doesn't feel genuine and it doesn't accomplish the goal. But what I love doing is actually going to that person's profile, finding something that I connect with or that I can ask them a question on and starting the conversation in that way. And I can't even tell you how many sales calls have come out of those conversations. Just a simple welcome message that's genuine, because people want to feel seen. They want to feel heard. They want you to open the conversation. And oftentimes what happens is someone will say, oh, hey, so-and-so just told me about you, or I just heard you on that podcast, or I was at that event that you just spoke at, and I'd really love to learn more about what you do. But if we hadn't started that conversation ourselves, it probably would have taken a few extra months to get them over that hurdle to actually book a sales call. So it's not that you're, having a really salesy conversation. In fact, you're doing the direct opposite, but ultimately you're achieving the same end goal.
Yeah. And I think that makes sense because it's social media for a reason. And yet so often what we do is skewed in like a promotional way, right? Like we're trying to make sales. Like you said, content isn't doing all the heavy lifting anymore. And so we need to get back to being social and building those connections. And I look at it as also being genuinely curious in the people who follow you and just thinking about, what is it that they might be here for and what can I do to support them? And the best way to get those questions answered is by having those conversations.
Totally. Just being a human. Like we're all people at the end of the day. And sometimes it's easy to forget that on social because it does feel like there's such a space in between you and the other person, but it's just a person on the other side of the screen.
And so if your team is doing that for your clients, do you let people know when you're, chatting with them, like, hey, this is Emily's team or whoever's team, or do you essentially pretend to be the person whose account is the owner?
We typically don't mention that it's a team. We haven't had that instance before. Most of our clients are really wanting it to not feel like there's a team between them and the person on the other side of the screen. It's oftentimes a conversation that I'm having during the sales process around this fear that a lot of founders have where they're unsure how to transfer their brand voice to an outside social media team, which is super valid because your brand voice is your brand. And if you lose that, you lose the business. So one thing that we're really great at 95 Media is being able to capture a brand voice very quickly. I look at it as being a chameleon to the brand. So ultimately, we don't want it to look like there's a team behind the scenes. We just want everyone to feel really seen, heard, and loved on by our client's business. And if it were to be a question, to have that conversation, appropriately. But for us, most of our clients want it to be themselves and they want themselves to just be represented in a way that they don't have the time for. And so that's where we come in.
Totally. So I'm curious to know how important the visuals are, because I think for me, it's less around the fear around outsourcing the message, because I feel like someone like yourself could pick that up very quickly. It's more like the design and the visuals and the aesthetics. And that's where I found other people I've worked with it's just been challenging to kind of capture that vision. So I'm curious to know, number one, how important are the visuals, especially when it comes to Instagram? And how do you capture that essence or support people in continuing to display the brand in the way that they have, in the years prior?
Well, I think the truth is that no one wants to hear this, but the truth is we all are more like aware of our brand than anybody else consuming it. So a lot of our clients, when we first start working with them, they're like, okay, like our feed has to have this pattern on it. It has to be color coded. It has to be like, exactly the way that I envision it. And truthfully, like no one cares.
Okay, good.
No one cares. And more than that, the reason no one cares is because so few people are actually looking at your feed the way that you are. So when people are consuming your content, it's typically on a one-off basis. You come up on their home feed or they see your post in your stories or it's on the explore page and it's one-off. And so if they go to your profile, sure, they're going to see it. But is the fact that your feed doesn't have a pattern going to be why someone doesn't book a sales call? No, it's going to be because your content doesn't speak to them and it's not valuable to them. Keeping that in the back of our head, yes, your brand is important and the way that your brand shows up should be consistent. There's also an element of the trends on social though. So when we look at Instagram versus TikTok, There's different fonts between the two platforms if you're creating a reel, for example. And what's my preference to do in terms of creating content is create the base video in an outside app like CapCut or InShot, move it into Instagram when you're going to post there, and move it into TikTok when you're going to post there to do the final editing of text, closed captioning, any images you want to put on there so that it's innate to that platform. Because of that, you're not going to have consistency of your fonts in every single space in every single way, which does bother some of our clients transparently, and they prefer to not do it that way. But what we know is that the app wants the content to be made within the app. So my biggest recommendation would be, yes, have your brand kit and know what feels aligned for your brand, but don't get so stuck in it that it prevents you from really optimizing your content and staying on trend with the algorithm and with the platforms individually, because there's a lot of opportunity that you won't be able to tap into if you get super rigid with your exact branding for specifically you.
I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Before we get back to the interview, I wanted to share a little something I think you'll find valuable. If you're looking for more clarity on what you want in life or feel like something is holding you back, I've created a free Dream Life Guide just for you. It's a step-by-step resource to help you get clear on your goals and break through any mindset blocks that might be in the way. You can grab it at iheartmylife.com/guide. And as a bonus, I've also included a private podcast feed to go along with the guide to give you even more value and support. So head over to iheartmylife.com/guide to download it for free. All right, now back to the conversation. And can you share a little bit about what cadence you recommend, how often you recommend people post? Is there like a combination of reels and carousels? Like what sort of content as well?
On Instagram in particular, we know there's so many different formats of content, right? So as you said, there's reels, there's static posts, which is just one photo, there's carousels, there's stories, there's live, like there's so many different formats of content. What we want to remember is that rotating through and using all of the features on any app is what they want you to be doing. So not getting caught up in just one is really key. My recommendation would be to use all of them as much as you can every single week. For example, the minimum amount of content I would recommend posting on Instagram every week is about 5 posts. I would keep that as like sort of a baseline. So whether you do 4 or you do 6 one week, it's, it all evens out. And of those 5 posts, to split it accordingly. Now, I like to do about a 50% split of Reels content because we know that Reels get pushed out the most and they're really your top of funnel content. So they get the most reach, the most impressions, and they bring in new eyes to the business. So we do want to lean pretty heavily on that. And then of the other 50%, doing carousel or static posts on your feed. Outside of that content, stories every single day really, really help build that relationship and the community aspect of your online presence, which, as we talked about, really can't be understated enough.
Thank you for breaking that down. And what would you say to people like myself where I have a personal account and I also have brand accounts? And truth be told, I find it super overwhelming. I actually have 3 accounts because I have my Peer Mastermind brand as well. And so it's like, there's just so much. Obviously, I can get support and outsource all of it. But what would you say to people who there's like a crossover and you don't want to post the same thing across 3 different channels, but you're like the head of the brand and it trickles down from you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love that you have a personal brand account because that is, I think, an element a lot of founders forget about is to build your personal brand and be somebody outside of the brand. So that's great to begin with, but struggling to post content between 3 profiles is real. So I would say if there is crossover content between the profiles to do collab posts, because that will allow that content to show up on both and also to have your audiences cross-pollinate, which could help both accounts grow. If you're able to, of course, creating different content for different pages, because ultimately the people who are following you are likely looking for more founder-led content. So what does your life look like as a founder of this business, and leaning into the personal side of your content versus the brand page, which is, of course, going to be more related to your offers and the transformation of your client, et cetera. But with that said, if there's not enough content to or you don't have the time to create content individually for all of the pages, what you could do is schedule out the content at different times so it feels like it's different going out, but ultimately you're repurposing the same content across the profiles. Maybe you just like swap the weeks of the month so that you have different content going out on the same day.
And do you have a favorite scheduling tool?
We use later.com. We've used it for a few years and it's a great platform, pretty inexpensive as well.
And is it true that the algorithm prefers when you post yourself versus scheduling something?
You know, that was like such a deep rooted belief of mine as well, like a couple of years ago. And I would say back in like 2021, 2022, we started testing auto posting. And nothing happened. Like nothing bad happened at all. So today we auto post anything that we can. The only content that we don't are Reels content, which as I mentioned is about 50%. So there's still a lot of content we manually post. But the reason I wouldn't recommend auto posting your Reels is because you do want to use the trending audio files when applicable. And so in order to make sure you're selecting the right audio file, you do have to do that manually right now, which is a pain, and I'm sure something they will fix down the road. But that's just where we're at right now.
For sure. So the other day I was scrolling through Instagram and this reel popped up and it was a super powerful reel. Essentially, it was a personal story of her in her marriage. Long story short, she ended up leaving the marriage and got pregnant and blah, 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 the whole thing. And it was really, really powerful. Like it had me captivated for the full 90 seconds. But what I realized was when I clicked off of that and went to her profile, although that one reel was really powerful, what she was talking about in that story or in that reel that told the story was different than what was actually happening on her feed. And it felt like they were two different people. And I felt like what I heard in the reel was going to be that she was going to teach something completely different than what I saw on her Instagram account and what her business actually does. Mm-hmm. And so that was really interesting for me to see as a consumer and somebody who, could essentially follow her. But ultimately what I felt was, well, I don't actually know what she does. And it doesn't feel like there's an alignment with what she just told me and what her feed is showing me. So I was confused. So long story short, what I'm trying to ask you is, how do we avoid that? How do we make sure that the brand message or what the founder is sharing is cohesive so that people aren't experiencing, something jarring where they're getting one thing and then coming to your full-blown feed or to your business website and then feeling like there's a mismatch?
Yeah, I mean, that's a terrible feeling to have and definitely something to avoid because what you're talking about is brand consistency and creating a consistent experience for your consumer to know what to expect from you is so key because what we know is that we have to hear the same message like 7 to 20 times in order to want to buy. So you heard that message one time and you were like, oh, I'm intrigued. And then nothing else connected the dots for you. And so you went off. But if she had other content and it was repetitive through her feed, you would have been like, oh, okay, like the things are matching. I understand. The way that we like to achieve that is through content pillars. So content pillars allow you to create pillars of your brand and just simply rotate through them in different ways every single week or every single month so that your audience knows exactly what to expect from you. What this ultimately does is allow you to say the same thing in very different ways, but have the same undercurrent of a message. So maybe in her instance, like if one of her content pillars was her marriage and her family, just as a family is probably like the pillar, that would be one pillar. But instead of it being a pillar, it was just one piece of standalone content for her. And that was why there was a disconnect. But if she talked about her family in like different ways every single week, it would have made a lot more sense continuously. So typically we do about 3 to 6 content pillars for any brand that we work with. And with that, if you're posting 5 times a week, you're typically using one content pillar every week. And so you're just rotating through your list of content pillars every week. And it's a really great way to just make sure you're not saying the same thing over and over again and that you're not saying something one-off. I would say most of our clients end up saying the same thing over and over again. Like a lot of our clients enjoy educational content, and so they get stuck in educational and they don't actually tell any stories or talk about their clients or anything like that, which is just as detrimental as having a one-off message. So the content pillars help you really make sure that you're rotating through it all.
Thank you for describing that. And so, for anyone listening who is doing their social media themselves, what is the process that you recommend? So, you mentioned the content pillars and kind of cycling through those. Do you recommend people have a spreadsheet where they write out all their content, maybe spend a few hours a month planning everything, and then obviously taking the time to actually post and share? Or what does that process look like?
I love planning the big ideas of content once a month. So, kind of at the top of the month, planning out, where your content pillar is going to lie in your calendar. I'm a very visual person, so I like looking at a calendar view. Okay, where the content pillar is going to be, what events do I have that I want to plug in, what holidays are coming up that I want to make sure we're talking about. So, you can just lay it all out. The problem with creating all of the content a month in advance is that things happen and our world is very up and down right now. Politically, economy, with the economy, with trends in the industry, with people getting canceled. It's just crazy. And so what happens if you map out all of the content, you create it all, sometimes you may feel stuck in that bubble rather than being able to adapt with the things that are going on. It's just so important to be able to read the room on social and adapt to what is going on in the space. With that said, mapping it all out allows you to have sort of that guideline for yourself. One thing I didn't mention either was trending content. You can't know what's going to trend a month in advance. So leaving those gaps in your calendar, maybe you just plug in trending post. And then with all of that mapped out, what I really like to do is create week to week, but create a week in advance. So right now we're recording this on a Thursday, but our team has finished creating next week's content as of yesterday for all of our clients. So we create internally Monday through Wednesday, schedule on Thursday, send it to the clients for review and approval so that by Monday, everything is finalized and it's good to go for the following week. We're not making any last minute edits. But with that being said, it allows us to be nimble and adjust to trends, adjust to social settings, while also making sure that we're not scrambling day to day to have content go out or wondering what's going to be posted tomorrow.
Totally. Okay. Thank you for describing that. And when it comes to hashtags, do you still feel like those are really important?
We do. I know that everyone has their own opinions on hashtags, but ultimately they're keywords. And if there's any opportunity to get your content in front of more people, my opinion is to jump on it. So we use hashtags to ultimately utilize words that our client's audience is using to search on the explore page. We're seeing a really big shift from search engines to social media. It's called social search. So people are beginning to search words and brands and locations on Instagram, on TikTok, rather than going to Google. And so when you know the words that people are searching for your industry, you can utilize those as hashtags on your post, and now you're showing up in those searches, which we know for a fact are happening. Because of that, I would recommend using hashtags on your content.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, cool. So you've given us so much to think about. I am curious to know, you dropped a little bit of a hint at the beginning of our time together around challenges. So if you've worked with over 200 brands, supported tons of clients, you obviously have a big team. What have been some of the challenges that you've faced over the last few years as you've grown and, dove headfirst into doing this work?
Yeah, certainly a lot, as every entrepreneur has faced, I'm sure. I think in our industry, in social media marketing, one thing that's a little bit different than a lot of the spaces that we serve our clients in is that it is constantly changing. So once you really nail down a process for something, it changes all over again and you have to start back over. So I constantly feel like I'm reinventing the wheel and redoing our internal processes, how we're serving clients, and really making sure that we are serving them really well, because we like to pride ourselves on a white glove service. So we want our clients to feel like the most important person in the room and like they are fully taken care of with what we do. So because of that, we have to constantly adjust our deliverables and how we're doing them. But that's on the client delivery side. And I think the other challenge with having a team of any size is consistently being in that leadership position, not only for your clients, but also your team. Right now we're a team of 8. And with that, there are, lots of different personalities and lots of different ways people like to work. And we're also fully remote. So that provides its own challenges at the same time. But one thing that we implemented a few years ago that has really changed our team dynamic is we actually host a in-person team retreat every January. So I fly everyone out, we get a big Airbnb for a couple of days, and we brainstorm and we work together and we go out and do fun activities. And it's just been a really big game changer for us as a team, while also, of course, working through the challenges that never stop. But as a remote team, it's really helped just kind of build and solidify who we are as a team culture.
Totally. Thank you for that. So the other day I was scrolling through social media on Instagram in particular, and I noticed like literally back to back, there was a brand that I always follow and then another brand that I don't normally follow. They had the exact same post. It was the exact same carousel post with the front graphics said the exact same thing. And I was able to tell obviously who posted first. And I'm curious to know how you feel about that, because obviously we're all getting inspiration. We're looking at what's trending. We're looking at the trending songs, the trending topics, all the stuff. But how do you feel about literally taking someone's idea for content and then making it your own?
Well, I mean, copying is never a good thing. Like, let's start there. It should never be a copy and paste situation. But I also feel like, truthfully, there's very few original ideas left. Like, everything's been done. So could it have been a coincidence? Sure. Could it have been that one person saw another? Could they possibly have the same person working on their content? Who knows? Like, there's a lot of different versions of what could have happened there. But I do think that taking inspiration from something is a great place to start. One example of being able to do that well is if something is trending, like a trending reel, and watching how multiple other people have executed that for their industry, it can give you some really great ideas on how you can do it for yourself. And plenty of people copy each other when it comes to trending reels. Again, there's not an unlimited plethora of ways to do something, but everyone has their own version of who they are. And that's what I would really lean into is think about who you are, who your brand is, who maybe your team is, your team culture, the way that you serve clients, and apply that unique aspect to the way that you execute the content. Could the base idea be the same? Yeah, of course. But like the way that you bring it to life, hopefully you're not using the exact same verbiage on a cover slide. Hopefully the inside slides of your carousel are not the exact same. But ultimately, putting your own touch on the content is essential because our consumers are smart. Like your audience knows if that sounds like you, if it's copied from somebody else, and you're probably going to get called out for it. So we want to avoid that by just putting our own unique touch on the content.
Totally. And I think sometimes it can just feel really overwhelming to constantly be creating. And whether, I work with a lot of coaches and entrepreneurs, and over the last 11 years have been around a lot of people just starting. And oftentimes it can feel challenging because you started a business because you want to help people and be a coach or be a copywriter or whatever it is. You weren't starting to be obsessed with social media and learn how to post and create content, et cetera. And so it can feel very challenging. And so I'm curious to know, what would you say to those people who maybe they're allowing it to stop them and hold them back from getting their message out there because they are feeling burnout by social media? They're feeling like they aren't creative when it comes to content. What are some of your suggestions?
The biggest one is to not let it stop you, because there's always going to be a reason to not post on social. But the sooner you start, the sooner you're going to start flexing that muscle and get better at it. A lot of our clients hate doing video content. It's something that really not a lot of founders like to do. But the truth is, we know that that's going to get you where you want to go because it's going to allow you to get in front of more people, et cetera. I would say if you're feeling the burnout or if it's something that you're not feeling inspired by, get support. That's why we do what we do, or why, a freelancer can help you or a virtual assistant can help you. Or, one of our services is actually shooting 3 months of content in 3 hours because our clients are busy and they don't want to shoot content every week. They want to just batch it out and get it done. And that's how we help them do so. There's solutions for everything. there's a way to get it done if you want to get it done, but there's also an excuse for everything. So I would just say, look at finding the easiest way through, whether that's you paying someone to help you or you batching out your work on a Saturday or getting it done in whatever way feels really good for you. There is a means to an end. And ultimately, these are free platforms. There's tons of free tools that can help you. So there's really very few barriers except our own mindset going into creating content.
Yeah. And I know it can be challenging for people, but one of my friends in my peer mastermind, she was telling us about her background as an actress and as somebody who has been in front of the camera for so many years as a presenter, all these things. And she said, guys, I used to have to audition, and compete with all of these people to be in front of the camera. Now you literally just have your phone and you have this huge audience right there. And she's like, it's a privilege for all of us to be able to access so many different people, all the clients, all of the, the people we want to impact in the palm of our hand. And so stop complaining and just recognize what an amazing opportunity we all have to reach so many more people literally for free and whenever we want.
Yeah. I mean, it is just being handed a community of people who could be buyers for you on a silver platter, but you would be surprised at how many people just let that stay there and they don't create the content that brings people through the buyer's journey and ultimately helps them do whatever they're looking to do and solve the pain point that their audience has. And that's just sad because you're letting people stay stuck in where they are rather than being able to help them. And I look at content as that vehicle that allows you to solve that problem for your audience, which is why, going back to what you said, it's why you started your business. You didn't start your business to be a social media personality, but you did start your business to solve a problem. And in today's world, both come hand in hand.
And do you feel like it's really important to have that community? What is it? It's like the chat feature where you can build a group with an Instagram. Do you feel like that's really important?
I think it's great. I don't think it's essential. Okay. None of our clients use it because they just don't have the bandwidth for it. And so our clients are signing massive projects and closing deals left, right, and center without it. So I know that it's not needed, but I do think that if you are someone who, you're building like a membership or something along those lines, that would be a great feature to begin using to have like a free entry point or a subscription, like a low point of entry before they join like your full membership to give them a taste and then lead them into a higher ticket offer.
So our last question that I ask all of our guests is, what is one way that people can create a life that's better than their dreams?
Ooh, I would say really setting that vision for yourself and making it like an unrealistic vision. When I first started 95 Media, my very first coach, it was literally my first coaching experience. And she was like, okay, cool. Like, what are your goals? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what's a goal? I don't know. And I was like, I'm just trying to like get by day to day. She's like, no, where do you want to go? Like, where do you want the company to go? Where do you want to grow? And I was like, I don't know. Like, that's so crazy. And so I really sat in that because she was like, okay, like, why don't you have a goal? Like, what's wrong with you? And I realized that I actually had a really big fear of setting goals because I didn't want to fail. And so I worked through that because I realized if you don't set the goal, not only can you not fail, but you also can't achieve it. And what a shame to not achieve something that is really big and audacious. So I started setting some really crazy goals, and there have been plenty of times that I have not hit those goals. But at the exact same time, even if you get 50% closer to that goal than you were a year ago, you've still made incredible progress. So I think it's a really cool practice to maybe have this idea of what you want in your head and then just take it up a notch and be like, okay, cool. Like, yeah, that would be awesome. But what about this? What about this crazy version of that goal? Because whether you hit it in a year or 5 years or 10 years, it's going to be really rewarding to look back and realize, oh my God, like I literally had that vision when I sat at my desk that day. And now here we are years later. So that was
so good. Yeah, I agree. And I think so often we're so obsessed with reaching the goal that we forget that the process is equally as important. And like, that's the whole thing. Like, that's the journey. If we're not present and not paying attention during those moments, we're missing out on so much of the experience of life, of being an entrepreneur, whatever it is that you're doing, when we're so focused on just getting to that end result.
The journey is everything. That's why we're here.
For sure. So tell us a little bit more about how people can work with you and where they can find you.
Yeah, so we are most active on Instagram. So that's a great place to find us. It's 90.5.media, all spelled out. Our best-selling service is really social media management, which is where we come in and act as a marketing partner for our clients. In that, we create high converting content with them in a plethora of ways. And so if you're someone who's looking to outsource your marketing or get support with your marketing, and being able to really focus on those needle movers in your business who would only you can do, that is where we plug in, and we're able to just help you scale while you focus on what you need to be doing in the business. So our website is 95media.co, all spelled out, and all of our services are there. We also have a podcast, Stop Scrolling, Start Scaling, if you want more tips on marketing and growing your brand through social media.
Thank you so much, Emma. This has been amazing. Everyone go follow her on Instagram, go to the website, get the support that you're craving to get your message out there and take all the stuff that you don't want to be doing off your plate. She can support you and help you grow at the same time. So thank you for this conversation. So appreciate you. And I'm excited to see what you do next.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the I Heart My Life show. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with 3 friends or post about it on social media using the hashtag I Heart My Life show. And don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. It really does help us spread the movement far and wide. Remember, everything you desire is possible. Keep believing in your dreams and taking action.